The RV Show USA is brought to you by Rockwood, building better RVs, making smarter RVers. That's right, Alan Warren, the RV Wingman with you. Have you ever wondered who builds RVs? I mean, the actual people themselves. Well, that's how we start off this week with Carl Miller, Operations Manager for the Rockwood Flagstaff Division of Forest River. With me about the people who actually work there in the plant. What kind of people are they, Carl, and what makes them qualified to build an RV?
Alan, we're blessed with a great group of individuals here at Rockwood Flagstaff Millersburg. We have people here that are, two generations removed from their parents used to work here. We even have one case where a grandparent used to work here, and so we have multiple generations. They care about the area they live in, the community they work in, the outreach that they can do by working in the RV industry. They show up every day. They care what happens after the sale. They care about when the RV goes to the dealership. Who does it get sold to? What do they do with it? Where are the pictures? They're always asking for information of, who's camping in the trailers that we're building, and what can we do? What can we change? What can we make better so that the customer's experience is better in the end? So ultimately, for their well-being and being able to work more, but also for the future generations.
But Carl, I often hear and read postings, and who knows, stuff that goes on the internet, but about this incredibly high employee turnover at RV manufacturing plants in the industry. Is that something that is pretty much industry-wide, or because I know you're in the tiny little town. I mean, it's just a little spot on a map called Millersburg. But the high employee turnover, is that industry-wide, or is that just in the big cities? What are your thoughts?
We're just if you blink, you'll pass right through town. Our plants are kind of back off the road a little bit, but the industry, or the idea that there's a high turnover, to me, it's not Rockwood Flagstaff. We know that, but going even bigger in the industry, the percentage of it, to me, is not. I don't believe it's greater than what it could be in other industries, across the country. But because it's so packed into one community or one county or two counties, one state, there's 80+% of the RVs are being manufactured in northern Indiana. It makes it seem like a greater percentage of turnover because we're all in the same area. But everything that the industry is trying to do, workplace safety, the consistency of the build, to try to make it so people have longer careers with the same manufacturer, which ultimately will build consistency in the product. And that's what we pride ourselves with at Rockwood Flagstaff.
It would seem to me that Millersburg, being a half hour or so away from the Elkhart, the epicenter of the RV industry, that you've got a much smaller, closer-knit community, and that will translate into better workers, a better attitude, people that work more closely with each other, and there's a spirit of togetherness that may not be found in some of the larger plants that are closer to the, more populated areas.
There is definitely a connection, especially since they're more likely to run into each other outside of work. So whether it's family members or just friends, when you work with somebody for a long time, if it's not family, it can become family. And being able to, if you choose to, connect with those people outside of work ultimately builds a culture that's more than just money. And that culture will bring quality in our belief, and that ultimately will spread down to the product that's being put out.
I want to go back to something that you said a couple of minutes ago, and I read stories and I hear things that there is this culture of drug and alcohol use, and it just runs rampant through the RV manufacturing industry. What do you say to people that say, well, that's just a bunch of druggies and people that are putting these RVs together? They paint a really ugly picture. I just what are your thoughts about that when you hear a story, people thinking that way?
I personally don't like to hear it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that northern Indiana is any different than any states, the other states across the country. We tend to gravitate towards the negative when it comes out. So to say that the industry doesn't have some of those issues, we can't say that. But Rockwood Flagstaff, I believe that we don't have that issue. I believe the industry as a whole, generally speaking, doesn't have a culture of drug addicts and alcohol. And to say that there's not people in there that deal with drug addiction or alcohol addiction would be false, because I think in any area, in any segment, in any manufacturing across the United States, you're always going to have those items, those issues that they have to deal with, and we have to work with them to help them overcome that.
I think it's sort of like, if something happens to an American tourist traveling to Mexico, it's a big story, but it's just a little tiny part of Mexico. The country of Mexico is really big, and we tend to blow the negative up. And I think that there's probably drug and alcohol abuse, throughout our country. But I would think less of it up there in northern Indiana. I'm no expert, but I've seen the people that live up there, and they don't seem like the people that are druggies and drinkers. So anyway, over the past few weeks, I have seen several folks that are asking about the quality control issue when it comes to building RVs. How do you check to make sure that the RVs that come off of your line are up to standards, Rockwood Flagstaff standards, Carl?
Well, I'll take that question. It's kind of twofold, where we look at, what is the standard that we want to build that we believe should go to the dealer, and then what is the standard that we believe the dealer should sell to the retail customer. And where some of this stuff gets mixed up is a manufacturer might say, well, this could get caught by the dealer at the time of PDI before they hand the keys over to a retail customer. We believe that as an industry, especially at Rockwood and Flagstaff, that we have to change how we approach quality going to the dealer. And we need to put checks and balances in place to ensure that our process online is actually working before it gets to the dealer, and not rely on the dealer to pass that information back to us. And to elaborate on that, some people call it a PDI before it goes to the dealer. We've kind of coined it a customer assurance inspection, a CAI. And so what we do is we take 10%, 15% of the trailers each day, and we put them through another facility, and they basically approach it as camp ready. That how can we double check what's coming out that the dealer might see or could see, that's something we are missing in our day-to-day operation, that we can then go back to that operation, that plant manager, those employees, those group leaders, and say, what are we missing? How come this is getting out the door? Because our goal is perfection out the door, and that's the journey we live in every day, trying to take that information and taking it back to the build process, to the engineering process, and say, what can we do better to take the human error out of it and put a better product into the dealer's hands, so ultimately it will be less that can get missed and go into the retail customer's hands.
All right, in the weeks to come, we are going to learn more about Flagstaff Rockwood's CAI facility, the Customer Assurance Inspection Facility. I believe this is a real positive step in the right direction. Not only is it a positive step for the manufacturer, it's a huge step forward for consumers and ensures a much higher quality finished product. When I toured the Rockwood Flagstaff plant, I was particularly impressed with pretty much everything. It was like watching a symphony performing. Everybody was right on cue. Things were very, very orderly and clean. The biggest thing that stood out was that everybody there seemed to be on a mission. I mean, they were busy. I didn't see any slackers or loafers. It was all very, very impressive. If you ever find yourself near Millersburg, Indiana, you really do need to find the time to schedule your own plant tour of the Rockwood Flagstaff facility. You'll leave with a more positive outlook on the RV industry and the people who work in it and the quality of products they produce. I'm Alan Warren, the RV Wingman, back